everybody know what SBIR stands for? Nope.
Nope.
Can we have Chris talk a little bit about SBIR?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Why don't you go ahead and talk about SBIR in general, and we'll give a little overview of that.
SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, and it has a sister program called STTR, which is Small Business Technology Transfer. These are sister, like as I said, sister programs. They are a $2.6 billion mandated budget, legislatively mandated. Let's see, 11 agencies participate, 11 federal agencies participate in the program, and those agencies have extramural research budgets, and the SBIR program is funded as a portion of those extramural research budgets. So even if their budgets are reduced, there is still SBIR dollars, it just is reduced along with everyone else's budget. So typically, or most importantly, what the SBIR STTR program does is it finances research and development. It is a grant, in most cases, to small businesses, not to institutions, but it is specifically for small businesses to fund their research. The funds are used strictly for the research and development with a little bit of a profit added to it to work on your business development and your commercialization efforts. It's a two-phase program. The typical phase one is about a 6-month project. It awards $80,000 to $150,000 depending upon the agency that you're seeking funding from. And then it goes, and the phase one project is to prove feasibility, to prove your concept. And then you move into the phase two program, which takes you a step closer to commercializing your product. Phase three, in some cases, is a sale back to the government if you're working with Department of Defense. Or phase three is a commercialization efforts on your own, and that is not funded by the government. But hopefully, phase one and phase two take you at least closer to that concept. If you're working in the life sciences arena, usually phase one and phase two are only going to get you closer to perhaps clinical trials or an IND application or something on that level. Whereas if you're in the IT zone or IT area or those other projects that you can get out the door quicker to commercialization, then phase three might actually be looking at a sale to a larger organization or selling the technology and moving on to your next step, whatever your commercialization is.
And maybe we can speak a little bit to this because, you know, Kevin, you were giving out some numbers when we were chatting. Historically, we in West Michigan have been absolutely pathetic at pursuing these types of, you know, so we represent everything here from loans to angels to venture capital to different stuff. This falls in that category of what we call non-dilutive financing, which means they don't take any ownership in your company. So as venture capitalists, angels, we love this. You as the owner of a business love this. And we need to get there, but you know, you had shared some numbers in terms of, you know, off the top of your head, I don't know if you guys know, like in terms of how much came into the state and how much of that came over here to the west side of the state. Don't quote them on this because these are rough numbers.
We did a study in 2009 at the Center for Entrepreneurship and looked at SBIR funding, and I think it's funding that we overlook much too much here, simply because we're not a research-based facility, but you don't have to be. It's small businesses that the government's trying to help this process. But I think that year there was about $35 million that came back into the state. And for the most part, 75 to 80 or even more of that went into the east side of the state, particularly in Ann Arbor. We accessed only $150,000 of those funds in West Michigan. And people say it's because we're not research-based. I said no, because Traverse City had 5 times more funding than we had.
Yeah.
And the UP had more funding than we had. We're just not even going after it. People don't realize what gets funded by the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is one of the largest funders of research on breast cancer. So you know, it's all kinds of things. People need to look at it.
Yeah.
Can you give some examples of businesses that would be good to apply for something like that?
Yeah, let's say, well, I'll let Chris kind of talk about that, but I'll give you some that come into us. We have a company here in town that's been funded by here that is doing education, has an education program where they do online education, and they applied and they've got SBIR funding. We've had people who are in the energy business that get funding. because they go to the Department of Energy, and they've got some technology that improves insulation for infiltration. So anybody who's doing any kind of technology, like I say, you have to go, you got to dig a little bit, but you got to get to know Chris and other people. Because, and in fact, I'll tell you, I knew about BBC before I even moved to Michigan in 2008, because I had gone to the programs in 2 different states. They are one of the best nationally known resources for SBIR, and they're only 2 hours away, and the state of Michigan helps us access them.
That's the best part. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that you're an SBIR kind of company. There's a couple things I wanted to point out that Mike mentioned too. Not only is it non-dilutive funding, you're not giving away your business in order to get this money. It's not money you repay back. It's not money that you share, and you don't share the IP with the government. It's your small business, but it also validates your technology. It says to the VCs and the angels that you have something that's credible, that the government thought it was good enough to invest in, so you're on your road to getting closer to something they might be interested in looking at.
Right.
So it's really, you could be, for instance, in about 07 and 08, we saw a lot of automotive suppliers that came to us looking for SBIR dollars because they wanted to diversify. They wanted to go into another arena. So if you're an R&D shop, that's great. You've always got some project that you want funding. But if you're a manufacturer, for instance, and you've come up with some, an injection molding, for instance, and you've come up with some new way to make that work better or less, that has some new quality that there isn't out there already in the market or isn't available, but you want to develop it further, those are potentials for making an SBIR project out of that.
Great. So let me jump back. We ran a little bit down a track there, but I really want to take some time to capture questions you guys might have. So as I said, we've got everything kind of represented here from even bank financing, loans, angel investment, grants, venture capital. What are some of the things that you guys are hoping to learn, take away from today? Anybody? You can just you probably came for a reason. Yes.
This is kind of along the SBIR, STTR track still, but I was wondering if you could compare and contrast them a little bit more, the pros and cons of each and which businesses might be more suited for which type of funding.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll do that. All right, what else we got?
Can you further define phase 2, what you were talking about?
Okay, you want more on phase 2?
Yeah, more on
Okay.
what phase 2 looked like.
All right, what else? Yep.
Regarding microloans, what stage of development the company needs to be in order to apply for microloans?
All right. Yep.
With the process you got to go through to apply for
For which one? Microloan or?
that? No, SBI.
You know what I think we'll do is we'll probably hit on process for all of them, because we've hosted panels before on kind of like what these are, but I think we're starting to get more questions on like, okay, I kind of understand what it is, but how do I do it? So we'll try to step through the how-tos on all of these major ones. Okay? Others? Anything? All right. And then really quick, so that I know, like who we've got, like how many people here are running something, starting something, looking at starting something? Okay, so that's a good chunk of the room. Otherwise, I know we've got some people that are in the ecosystem service part of the economy. That gives us some idea that most of the people here are probably looking at something like that. So why don't we? Let's start looking at let's start with some of the GROW programs and some of the different funding things that exist and how people access that.
Sure. To knock the question out of the way as far as where you need to be in the program, to receive a micro loan, the business just needs to be a licensed business. So if I can go to either the Department of Labor and Economic Growth's website and pull down your articles of incorporation, or even Kent County's website, which will have your DBA paperwork on file. Once those are in place, then you're eligible for a microloan. Now, whether or not we would be a logical step is a whole different story, because there's kind of the practical side and then there's just the regulatory side. and I'm going to try to hop back and forth. As a rule, because we are a loan, in really to just give you an operational piece, we borrow our money from the SBA. So the money we lend out, we actually have a loan from the SBA that we have to pay back. So that's why usually we're structuring it as a loan as well, and that if the loan does go into default, there's a collection process that we follow through as well. We haven't had to yet, and we're hoping to not have to for as long as possible, but and it's lending, so the name of the game is with loans, is eventually we will have to collect, I'm sure. But because, again, it is a loan, there's an interest rate attached to it, I don't know if I would necessarily say or recommend that we're a good stop for actual research and development. Just because that's when the repayment process starts, as soon as you close the loan. And until that business is generating revenue for you, you're going to have to find money somewhere else, somehow else, to pay back the microloan.
What size of loans are you guys generally involved in?
Anywhere from 1,000 to 50,000, again by program, by SBA guidelines. Right now, to make sure we can initiate as many loans into the community as possible, we're limiting our loan size to 10,000. That may change here sometime in the next couple of months, just as different funding becomes available and the sequester goes away. That'll probably free up our hands a little bit as well. We can go less than 1,000 loan size, but what happens was the process becomes so involved that getting a $500 loan is actually easier through other avenues than going through the microloan process, because you're collecting documentation, you're making a business plan, you're creating projections, things of that nature.
Yep.
There just needs to be a return on investment for a $500 loan.
Yeah.
It's probably a better place to go.
Yeah. And so where do you fit in the ecosystem? Like starting with raw ideas and going through growth capital, and in the middle of there you've got like probably some pre-revenue and post-revenue stage. Where are you guys fitting into that? What are you looking for primarily?
Generally, we're going to want a business that's in operation. So you already have a prototype, you're already looking to maybe even start manufacturing and selling. Once you've identified, again, that revenue stream from sales or from something, that's the point where we'll probably start being a good fit or a good idea. Much before that, again, we're going to start taking your money, and that's not a good idea. When you're going through the research and development portion, you're going to want to make sure you can have as much of that money staying in your pocket as you can.
Good, great. I think I might have, Kevin, I'll probably have you and Eric tag team on this one before we jump we'll look at some of those other programs. We've got there's a lot of stuff that's available that SBTDC, CEI, that we work with people on, everything from Business Accelerator Fund to pre-seed to, maybe you guys can tag team a little bit, hit some of those programs that are available, but also hit on the how-to. How do I go, where do I access those? What types of things are those programs looking for? Where do they fit in the funding ecosystem? And, and even from, SBTDC side, there's also a service component there. How do I get help, doing some of this kind of stuff? And I'll let you guys bounce back and forth on that. And if you have questions during this, don't feel like you got to sit here. Raise your hand. We'll jump in. We're here for you guys, so let us know if we're missing stuff.
Okay, I'll talk about this funding we have available to the MEDC, and in fact, it's available through the Smart Zone, and there are 2 Smart Zones in the area. One of them is the Grand Rapids Smart Zone, which is on the 5th floor of the Good Voss Center, and we are revising the website, so you can get information right now through the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation website. And then there's another one up in Muskegon at Merrick.
Kevin, what is a smart zone, and where did they come from, and what's the purpose of them? Why are they smart?
They were obviously, they didn't name them recently. They were done, I think, in Engler's time, under his direction. And they're economic development zones where a certain part of in Grand Rapids, for instance, a certain part of the taxes that come out of a certain geographic distance, finance authority actually go in to support these smart zones. But they're designed to help support early stage companies. And the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, through the 21st Century Job Fund, uses the smart zones to allocate and get access to some of the funds that they use to to do startup, to support startup companies. And we actually have access to 3 different funding sources, which we work with early stage companies, and they actually kind of fall into 3 categories. One of them is a loan, the other one's a grant, and then the final one's a equity investment. The first one is called the microloan program, and this is for all these are really designed for sort of what we call high-tech or high-growth companies. So you have to be, versus Bill, where you might be a lifestyle business. We're looking for companies that are going to grow fast. So they're going to be in technology, health sciences, bioag, advanced manufacturing, anything that has a potential for fairly high growth. Because the purpose of the Smart Zones is to actually help create jobs with new companies. But in the microloan program, you can get anywhere up to $50,000 for an early stage pre-revenue company. So before you get other outside investment, equity investment, or before you have revenue, you can come to us and apply for a microloan program. It requires basically a 10-page business plan that we can submit, and the loan is for a 2-year loan, and it's to kind of get you started, and there's no interest payment until the first year. And then at the end of the second year, you start paying back the loan. The rate's fairly high, it's 12%, but it's not a personal guarantee, which if you've ever tried to go borrow money for an early stage company, most of the banks are going to want you to put your house and everything else on the line. The second program is called the Business Accelerator Fund, and this is actually a grant, and we can actually grant money up to $50,000 to a company for a high-impact investment or a high-impact grant. So it's for companies that have got something going that they just need to get from one milestone to another. And let's say, for instance, and on the other side of that milestone, something significant is going to happen, such as I need a prototype. And if I get this prototype, then I can go raise additional money. Or we financed one recently for a company that needed a certification. And once they got that certification, they could make their first sale. And so they actually got a grant for up to $30,000 to do that. So that's called the Business Accelerator Fund. And again, accessing that through the Smart Zone. And the final one is called Pre-Seed, and it's an equity investment. And it's up to $250,000. It's a match. So if you're raising money, and we've accessed that with a number of companies, and actually with Startcharter's investment. So if you're going to raise money and you're going to get an investor, what you do is you say, I can go get a match from the state. And so if you'll invest in my company up to $250,000, I'll go get another $250,000 from the MEDC pre-seed equity investment, and that will match up to it. The key on that one is that all that money has to come in at the same time. You can't go get your equity investment and then go get the pre-seed. You've got to have it all structured to come in. But we've accessed that with a number of companies in the state. So those are all programs designed, again, for early stage companies, and it's all designed to try to get these companies started and get them a little bit of startup early stage capital, which is some of the hardest capital to find.
Right, right. And so what is the gateway for that? How do people access that? I know they can go kind of through touch base. I know sometimes they go to you and you send them over to Eric's group, or you send them out. It kind of works them in a circle, but who should somebody contact if they're interested?
Well, the person to really contact would be Jeff over there, Jeff Rice, or myself, and we can direct you to where you need to go. For instance, the microloan is a business plan requirement, 10 pages. The pre-seed requires over 30, and there's a process for approval that you have to get. They have to be reviewed. The Business Accelerator Fund grant is basically a 5-page grant. And again, we will sit down with you, help you decide which program is best for you, and then help you prepare the application process.
Great.
Anything to add on that, Eric?
Well, our group works with business plan writing as well. We don't write them for you. We provide templates. We have workshops and whatnot. And we critique. We're also have pretty deep experience in financial statement preparation, projections, and whatnot. So we can help there as well.
Yeah, so I mean, several of our teams have worked with Eric's group and Jason Plimmel and the people over there, where they come in and so I need this 5-page plan, or I need this document, or I need a set of financials, and if that stuff is new to you, they're a very, very patient resource in terms of helping you. Again, they don't do it for you, but they really do step you through. The templates that they have are great in terms of work with, and you're gonna need that stuff at some point. For those of you that have worked with StartGuard, you know that we operate on very little paperwork, frankly. I mean, but most of the programs you're going to encounter, you're going to need that stuff at some point. So it's always worth bopping in there. And they also know all of these programs that are available. So when you're walking in, if you've just got general questions about, and you want to stop in one place, which of these people should I talk to? We do some of that too, but it's another good source.
You can find information.
Is that nine on you?
Yeah. You can find information on these capital sources at our Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and we have a link on capital resources, and that will tell you about each of the programs.
We're funded by the SBA and the MEDC, so there are no charges to our clients. I don't like to say it's free, that sounds cheap, there's no charges.
Right. So Eric, why don't you also talk a little bit, since you've done stuff with Michigan, with the Muskegon Angels. I know, Kevin, you've got something to say, but talk a little bit about the angel networks. So one thing, and Kevin, you're always good with statistics. We actually had a huge increase in the amount of angel capital that was deployed in the state of Michigan last year. It was, even surprising to the people that are in that space. Do you remember what the numbers were?
I don't remember that, but as the Grand Angels just did their report, so we have one angel group in the Grand Rapids area, and we did about $3 million of investment last year.
Right.
Probably with a dozen different companies.
Which was up from what?
Like in 2009, it was only 190,000. So
right.
They're significant, and we're developing new. This was up in Muskegon. This is a great angel group that
right.
came in and got created up there with Eric's work. And there's 22 angels that have committed. I think $250,000 each over a 5-year period. 225. Yeah.
And close, we've got 22, going on 25 of the very top entrepreneurs in Muskegon County that have each committed $25,000 a year for 5 years. But beyond that, and even more importantly, in some instances, they're also willing to mentor the companies. So right now, we've got a bank account with $550,000. We're looking at making 2 to 3 investments per year, $100,000 to $200,000 each. Primarily focused on Muskegon County, where they want to create and retain jobs in Muskegon County. But they'll look at virtually any type of business except a lifestyle business.
Right. So that gives you some idea, are you guys doing only equity investments, or are you looking at convertible debt, or?
We'll look at virtually anything.
You'll look at just about anything. And then what you'll also find is what we're starting to develop in Michigan is a pretty good network between the angel organizations. There are things that have come into Grand Angels that then get syndicated and are funded by a combination of, so really, there's Northern Michigan Angels up in Traverse City, relatively new group. There's Blue Water Angels out of the middle of the state. There's Muskegon, there's Grand Angels.
And then there's Michigan Angel.
Michigan Angel New, which is again a relative. We're starting to see more and more of these pop up, which is great to see more people getting in the landscape. But to some degree, you can start using your local angel fund as a entry point into that whole, because they're all looking for kind of the same type of information and data, and are looking at similar stage companies. Now, I will say that we work a lot with the angels because they don't tend to do a lot of pre-revenue kind of deals. Sometimes they do, but you're not usually looking for it. If they're looking at doing a few deals a year at a couple $100,000, really early, you're not looking for a couple $100,000. And this is why we started doing what we do at StartGuard, where we're funding those really, really early stage ideas at the $5,000 and then the $20,000 levels to get to some of those experiments. But once you get past those, then we start talking with Kevin about Business Accelerator Fund, microloans. We start looking at what SBIR might be able to offer. So that's kind of the ecosystem here. Really, really early, raw, back of a napkin stuff. StartGuard is probably your entry point, unless you have friends or family or people that are willing to fund that. And then as you can see here, we can start to ratchet it up. Let's now jump to, we got a couple questions on the SBIR and some of the other grants. So compare and contrast was the first one. Do we have a question? Yeah.
If I'm understanding correctly, the smart homes will be limited to the state on the Grand Rapids area.
smart zone stuff?
Smart loans.
Um,
No, it's, and my second question on that, are there geographic limitations on any of the programs that you have available? And the reason why I'm asking that, we're from the Plainville area, but not from Plainville.
Okay, so if you didn't hear that, a person from Plainwell area asking if there's geographic limitations, or does it have to be Grand Rapids, Muskegon, you know, when you're talking about, because part of the smart zone, there literally is physical components to that too, so maybe you should talk about that, because you've got the incubators and some of the, you know, about the, well, not the real estate component of it, but there is a physical area called the smart zone, but then there's the programs that are a little bit different.
Right. If you, the incubator and the smart zone can actually support rent and other types of facilities within the smart zone, and the smart zone is a specific area that we do that. However, the programs can be applied to anybody and throughout the state. You tend to work within your area, but for instance, the funding sources, we can work with you in the Plainwell area. And there is actually another one down in Kalamazoo too, Smith, that tends to be life sciences oriented. But the programs we can work with. The angel groups tend to invest locally, but not necessarily.
Yes, I mean, some of them in the state of Michigan, you know, require, but generally all these things are state level. And so a lot of times it's up to the entrepreneur to figure out where the best entry point is. And sometimes it's like, who has done things like this? So like if you're a real life science, they've done a lot of life science in GR, but they've done a lot of life science down in Kalamazoo too. There's stuff they've done out of Muskegon. So, you know, sometimes it helps to figure out, you know, who's run companies that are like yours through this process before.
More than likely, we're not going to be doing our agriculture bio-ag up on the 5th floor either of the Cook DeVos.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to keep that out of the lab at Cook DeVos. So good. That's good clarification. Any other questions, real quick, before we jump on to some of the grant stuff? All right, great. Chris, why don't we answer that? You know, you can do two at one while you're doing it. Compare and contrast, and more on what phase 2 is all about. And while you're answering that, do you have to go through phase 1 in order to do phase 2?
Good question. Let me back up just one more step. As a state service provider, BBC ETC runs and conducts training sessions throughout the state. Introductory sessions on SBIRs and what they are, what kind of money is available, what agencies participate, that sort of thing. And then we have agency-specific training. So for National Institutes of Health, for instance, it's one of the more complex agencies to respond to. So we have a 2-day training session that really gets into the nuts and bolts of how to write your proposal, how they review it, who the reviewers are, that sort of thing. That is a service that the state of Michigan provides to companies that are basically funded or basically based in Michigan. So that service is at no cost to you. And then we work with you one-on-one once you've gone through the training and actually coach you and help you through the writing process and all the way through to submission. So be sure to cash in on the opportunity to work with BBC. And also the SBTBC has a bit of SBIR help available as well. So take advantage of those opportunities. As far as the SBIR program, phase 1 and phase 2, let me back up. SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. Typically in SBIR, there's a little bit more money available to be funded. It does not require that you work with a nonprofit institution. And STTR does require that you work with a nonprofit institution, usually an academic university or another nonprofit lab of that sort. A portion of the work must be done at the small business, and then a portion must be done at the institution. With an STTR, on each of these proposals, there is a lead technical person, usually senior kind of person in the science or the field of study. That's called a principal investigator, a PI. So on an STTR, the PI is able to be employed at the institution. But an SBIR, the PI must be employed at least 51% at the small business. So that kind of explains, that's about the nuances of between the two. When you work with an academic institution, there's always a sharing of technology and a sharing of the technology that's developed. So you have to look at how you want to handle the IP in those situations. Where at a small business, you usually can control the IP and keep it in-house and own that IP. Sometimes there's joint publications and that sort of thing that come out of working with a university or an institution. What was the next one? Oh, phase 1, phase 2. So phase 1 is typically, and most of these are hypothesis-driven research. So I have a question, I'm going to try and solve that question. In a phase 1, it's usually 1 or 2 what we call specific aims or milestones that we want to achieve. So we're going to be very specific and trying to do this and trying to do that, and if those are both successful, then we've accomplished those aims in phase 1, and now we're going to take that data and go into phase 2 and further advance that project to make it closer to coming out with either a prototype or, depending upon what the technology is, writing an algorithm or something of that nature. So that takes you through to phase 2. And then sometimes you have multiple projects going on, and with the data that you gather from all those multiple projects, you're even closer to whatever your commercialization plan might be in moving that technology out.
Cool. Any more specific questions on that stuff that trigger anything, or so what are, again, just kind of go through what government departments are part of this, and what are some of the things that you've seen that are succeeding right now? What are the type of things that aren't? There's always like kind of trends that are happening. What's happening there right now?
Okay. There are 11 agencies that participate, as I said. The largest is the Department of Defense. They have $1+ billion. They have almost half of the budget of all of the SBIR program, big numbers. Then there's HHS, Health and Human Services, which consists of the CDC, FDA, NIH, and Child and Family Services Division. NIH having the largest dollar amount, and that's typically your life sciences, although interestingly enough, they just sent out something yesterday about looking at portable apps being a lot of technology that we're seeing come in the door is ways to keep people, especially seniors, compliant with their meds on a portable app, and various programs like that. So there's lots of IT kind of stuff that's very interesting right now, education-wise as well, educating patients on various aspects that you can do via mobile app or laptops or whatever. Then there's the USDA. There's a good portion of opportunity with the USDA, NASA, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation. And then the 5 or 6 agencies that only participate in the SBIR program because they have smaller budgets would be USDA, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, Department of Education. I'm going to forget something. But those are the smaller agencies that participate. It'll come to me later, I'm sure. Department of Energy has a variety of things. Obviously, they're looking at ways to reduce gas consumption, fossil fuel identifiers, lots of different, they're kind of all over the place. National Institutes of Health, or NIH, is basically looking at anything that will improve human health. And it can be from neurological, there's 26 institutes and centers within the National Institutes of Health. Each of them have their own mission, and each of them have their own interest, but it's like heart, lung, and blood, and neurological disorders, and it's all over, it plays the gamut. Department of Defense is a little bit unique, and they have very specific problems that they want solved. So in their response, you're looking at responding to a very specific question or specific problem. And they will give you criteria that they're looking for. They want a component that's going to make this do something with this down to this millimeter of whatever. Isn't that a technical term? So they're very specific. So when you work with Department of Defense, you're responding to a question or a problem that they have, and you're going to solve that. So theirs is topic-driven. The rest of the agencies are pretty vast and open. You can almost respond to most anything. And as Kevin alluded to, Department of Defense has a huge study and a huge amount of money that they grant in cancer research. It's very important to them. As is NIH, has recently been funding things in the education realm. So you can't kind of pick an area and say, this is my industry, so I'm going to stay here. You kind of have to shop it and look around. Fortunately, there's a lot of data available on all of the agencies' websites. You can go in and look at what they funded previously, see what companies they funded, and what research projects and what identifiers that they have been looking for that are pretty interesting to them.
Great. So Well, again, questions, does that raise any questions with anybody? Any questions on any types of the funding that, you know, that we're talking about? No? So, Chris, in terms of BBC, really quick, Eric kind of shared how SBTDC works. You know, it's really an entity funded by the government. They don't take any. How do you work with clients? You know, what's the cost? How does that all play out in terms of, because you guys are a private entity. You're not a state program.
Exactly. We're a little bit unusual because we're a for-profit company that provides a service that is usually provided by the SBTDCs or other nonprofit agencies. But the state, fortunately, appreciates our work and has funded us to do this. So the process is, we have these training sessions, as I mentioned, throughout the state. They're available. We also do webinars that we conduct. For coming into the program, basically we ask you that you complete an assessment form that's available on our website. You can attend one of our focused training sessions, either a one-day or two-day training session, kind of based on that agency that you're focusing on or that you're targeting. And then you sign a contract to work with us. The contract basically says that we will work with you one-on-one as much time as needed and necessary